All right. So worldwide, depression isn't unique to the US. We all know that. Approximately 280 million people in the world have depression. It's estimated that 3.8% of the population experiences depression. That is huge, including 5% of adults, 4% among men, 6% among women. Notice that's not that great of a disparity. I think where we used to see so many females or women that were reporting depression, men still had it. They were just reluctant to report it. I think now we're seeing men are more open to reporting it and talking about it. And that's a critical component. But now depression is about 50% more common among women than men, but look at those numbers. Now, even though it is more common, what are we talking about? Are we talking about depressive symptoms? Are we talking about unspecified depression? Are we talking about major depressive disorder? Are we talking about depressive instances or distortions? When we look at these statistics, a lot of times they say depression. Now, if you go to your doctor, right? I know my doctor does this, my primary care physician. Every time you go, right, you fill out that quick little, and it gives you the one or two statements about depression and suicide, right? In the last 2 weeks or, since your last visit, have you had, difficulty getting motivated to do things you once enjoyed, anhedonia, right? Things like that. Have you thought about hurting yourself? And then have you developed a plan? Things like that. Some physicians do that. I think all physicians should be doing that. Some do, some don't. But those two components isn't major depressive disorder, and you mark off those two. That means that there's some depressive symptoms there. But it doesn't mean you have major depressive disorder. We know that. So we got to look at these numbers and say, okay, let's put a pin in them. But we know that it is huge, huge. And around the world, we don't just want to say 50% more common among women than men. That's worldwide. Think about outside the US. So sometimes I'll have people contact me from the Middle East, from Japan, from different parts of the world, the UK, Canada, things like that. And when they contact me, so what are we talking about? Are we talking about, is that the 50%? That's the 50% we're talking about. So we're seeing that more women worldwide, right, are reporting having a more depressive perspective, symptoms, so on and so forth. Doesn't mean major depressive disorder. Also, more than 10% of pregnant women and women who have just given birth experience depression. Does that mean postpartum depression? Also, what was their depression prior to the pregnancy, so on and so forth. We all know how to do that good assessment and get that idea as to how long has that depression been there? What are those depressive symptoms? What are those factors and concerns? Absolutely. So rising trends, right? Remember the Muppet Show? All right, there was a Muppet News flash there, right? This just in. So this rising trend, lifetime and current depression rates. And this is really important. So I want you to see this. And this is pretty recent data because we see it's 2023. So has a doctor or nurse ever told you that you have depression? Now let's just think about that question first. What does that mean? Does it mean unspecified depression? Specified depression? What exactly? Oh, sorry about that. What exactly does that mean? Right? So if they ever told you have depression, what kind of depression? And what's the severity? They don't know. But when they answered this, that's a pretty general question. It's a yes or no question. So we know that there's some variability there. Do you currently have, or are you currently being treated for depression? Okay, current level of depression, we understand that. Okay, has someone told you had it? So have you currently, or have you ever been treated for depression? Now we see that the green I'm pointing to, as if you can see my finger. So, so the green, look at that, the percent said yes, and lifetime depression. Look at that lifetime depression, significantly over current depression. And look at that rate. Look at that rate, 29%. Look at the current depression. Depression is a huge, huge issue. And here's my other thing, and you're going to hear this a lot, today, and because I think it's so important for us to recognize, we all have an idea or conceptualization what depression is, but it's so misunderstood. Because I think a lot of times the person with depression gets blamed for not working hard enough, not exercising, not getting up, by golly, and doing this, that, and the other thing. So what can we do? How can we manage that? But it's so misunderstood. And we have to understand that it's the depression that is like concrete shoes, right? That it's hard to move, it's hard to go. So what do we do? And that's part of what we're going to talk about today. Absolutely, we're going to dive into that because I'm so passionate about that. Now, lifetime and current, again, this is from that SAVE 2023 study, right? This is from the Gallup folks. Diagnosed with depression in their lifetime, U.S. adults, okay, 8.4%. Look at the gender, right? Men to women, 20.4 to 36.7. That's a huge disparity. But we know whenever we look at gender differences, we have to bear in mind that women tend to be a little more open about their emotional struggles than men. That's still true today. So we have to really bear that in mind. But check this out. Look, this is gonna blow you away. It's right there. Look at that. 2017 to 2023, U.S. adults went from 20.6% to 29%. We have a depression epidemic in this country. Absolutely we do. And then let's look at the age, because this is what this is all about, looking at the ages. We have to understand who we're dealing with and who we're working with, because this massive increase, right? Almost a 33% increase from 2017 to 2023, right? So that is huge. When we have clients that are reaching out to us or we're trying to connect to clients, should we be talking about depressive symptoms and depressive factors? Absolutely. Because there's so many people out there that have depressive symptoms that have not exacerbated to major depressive disorder. So we got to bear this in mind. And I'm not saying just depression. I mean, if this was on anxiety, we'd see pretty similar numbers, similar increase, maybe a little more because of the pandemic. And we got to bear that in mind. Now, let's look at the ages, right? I bet none of us are surprised. Look, check it out. From 2017 to 2023, look at that change. We've got 13.9% change. That's huge. Look at that, 30 to 44. We've got 12.6%. Let's just look at our clients that are 18 to 44. Massive. That is a massive change. It is a massive change. Interestingly, 44. So when we look at that group, 30 to 44, what we're looking at are individuals that in many ways grew up with a lot of technology, more efficient technology. Now, I'm not going to say, that the iPhone is the worst thing in the world and that's why there's so much depression and all this other stuff. That isn't the only additive, not at all. It's a component and we all know that. So we have to talk about screen time. Just like with Sarah, we're talking about screen time. Man, do they hate talking about screen time. They hate it because they think that the answer is to say no more screen time. You're not going to do that. They're going to lie to you. They're going to tell you one thing. They're going to do something else. If they can cut it down, that's awesome. I think that's great. The reality is, let's talk about how you can manage the content that you are looking at online and how you're interpreting it. If you're not going to change your behavior, right, let's change it from maladaptive to adaptive. How can we do that? Okay. Oh, Mary, I see your hand raised. As soon as I'm done, we're just talking over this slide. I'm going to pop right in there. And then look at 45 to 64. We got a 5.7% chance and not much of 65 and older, which is pretty interesting because, again, as individuals are getting older, we know that depression becomes more common, particularly as we have cognitive decline, perhaps dementia, perhaps falls. It can create traumatic brain injury, stroke, things of that nature as well. Let's look at that race and ethnicity component. Now we have Black or African American adults here in the U.S. We got 14.3% change. That is huge. Huge, huge, huge. Hispanic population, about 13%. Huge. And, it's interesting. And we see that white adults has that 6.7% change. Now, it's still an increase, and I think that this is very fascinating, which is why I think we have to consider culture. We have to consider the home environment that the individual is growing up in. Where is that extended support system? Do they have it? Who are they closest to in their family? So on and so forth. So looking at those things and as that relates to the individual's connection to their culture. What I have found is that most cultures are pretty positive. Most cultures are encouraging. Most cultures want their individuals, the people who populate that culture, to do well, to grow, to succeed. So how can we tap into that cultural component?